I'm 8 years old, right? And I'm just telling my parents this story. But then I started getting to some of the SA stuff and some of the abusive stuff, and in my mom's face, kind of went from a laughter to, she started contemplating what I was saying, whether there was any truth to it, and
Wow.
it wasn't too long before she spoke with my aunt, and she started talking to her kids, and her kids were essentially corroborating what I was saying. We know for a fact they were abused because of the way they behaved when they came home. So there's so much evidence. It
Yep.
has nothing to do with justice, like,
Yeah.
because justice wasn't served. It has everything to the contrary. It has everything to do with covering stuff up and cleaning house. That's what it has everything to do. It has nothing to do with justice. Because if it had anything to do with justice, and they were these godly men they're claiming to be, these Vance and Keith Lashbrook would be in prison right now.
Natalie told us a story that she sat across from Michael Brown in 2008 after Keith Lashbrook had been fired by Fire School of Ministry in 2007, I believe. And she said she sat across from him telling him the story of how she's adopting from Lashbrook's orphanage and telling him how she's doing. And because it was at the 10-year Fire School reunion, and he just listened to her and thought didn't say much about it.
Had he blown the whistle on Keith, there's a chance that, he would be putting his own head on the block.
Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Wake Up and Win podcast. Today, I'm your solo host, Blaise. I'm missing my sidekick because she was putting our son to bed during this episode today. So anyway, we're going to dive in with a pretty powerful interview with Elijah Evans. Now, Elijah's story is very heavy, so trigger warning at the beginning. CSA involved in this story, but Elijah Evans was a part of the orphanage in Haiti. He was a Haitian child in the orphanage in Haiti that was run by Keith Lashbrook, who was connected to Globe International. Okay, and if you followed the story, Globe International was caught up in this whole scandal, and things went public in 2010/2011 about this, where multiple Haitians were adopted and brought to the U.S. and then told their story to their adoptive parents, who a few of those parents were a part of Fire School of Ministry, or BRSM, and had graduated. And so the story is entangled a little bit with Dr. Michael Brown. How is that so? We're not implicating Michael Brown. However, our opinion is that there's possible and likely, based on receipts, knowledge of Michael Brown knowing that Keith Lashbrook was a sexual abuser. And how do we know this? Because he fired Keith Lashbrook from Fire School of Ministry in, I believe it was late 2007, because he had essayed a young girl, a teenage girl student on campus at Fire School of Ministry. And so the problem becomes that these fire students connected to Globe because it was a trusted organization. Neither one was under the other, but it was a trusted organization locally, and they went to work with Globe International. And there are some of them that adopted children from the Haitian orphanage. Now, one of the toughest situations that we've seen here is that in 2008, Natalie Lewis sat down with Michael Brown at her 10-year class reunion and told Michael Brown about Keith Lashbrook and that she was adopting children from Keith Lashbrook's orphanage in Haiti. So the issue becomes that Michael Brown had fired Keith Lashbrook at least about a year or so before that conversation for essaying a teenage girl on Fire School of Ministry's campus. And so Natalie Lewis, sharing her experience adopting orphans from Keith Lashbrook's orphanage, means that Michael Brown either was negligent in paying attention to the connection of information, or decided not to say anything, and because I don't know why he wouldn't say anything. I do not know why he would not say anything to Natalie Lewis and to say, oh, Keith Lashbrook, the man that I fired from Fire School of Ministry for essaying a teenager last year, I didn't know he was running an orphanage with children in it, and you'll be adopting those children from his orphanage. Well, lo and behold, those children were being essayed by Keith Lashbrook as well as Vance Cherry, who Keith had hired to work in Haiti with him, with the boys. And that's where Elijah Evans' story comes in. Elijah experienced horrendous situations by the hands of Vance Cherry, who was the brother-in-law of Keith Lashbrook, who was a part of Globe International. And when all this hit the fan, Michael Brown seemed to get himself involved somehow in the communications with Globe. So here we are at this point. We're going to listen to Elijah Evans' story today. It's a powerful story. This young man has been through it, but he's also come out on the other side, and he has found his voice in such a powerful way. So, guys, without further ado, welcome to the show, Elijah Evans.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
for joining
you.
us. We appreciate you coming. So how are you feeling today, man? You nervous? You feeling confident? How are you feeling today?
I am a little nervous, but I do feel confident in myself to be able to speak my truth.
Awesome. Well, we want to give you a platform, in the midst of all that's going on. Obviously, your mother came out, Melissa told her story, told you guys' story. Natalie Lewis came out bravely and is still speaking up. And then Shersty and Eric have spoken up on the podcast. And so we wanted to give you a chance to share your story at this point, because you spoke on Laura Lynn's podcast probably 4 or 5 months ago, but quite a bit has come out since then. So I think we just want to start with, tell us about yourself, how you got into that orphanage there, and then we'll begin to kind of ask you further questions. You think that's a good place to start,
Yeah,
Christina?
I think that sounds
Okay.
great.
All right, and I'm going to try to remember because I was very young, but from what I remembered, my family was very poor when I was in Haiti, when we lived there. And my older sister had died, and she had 2 kids. They were older than my sister and I. And essentially, because they were older, they could do more. And with my sister dying, it meant we had to feed them as well. And because they could contribute more than we could, my parents decided, from what I understand now, they decided that it was best if we went to the mission instead of them, because they were older and could actually contribute to the household. That's just the culture in Haiti. Your ability to contribute to the family is very crucial. It's just part of life there. And anyway, I came to the mission, and I remember feeling very distraught and confused, and just kind of being plucked out of what the world that you've known for as long as you've been alive, and placed into a complete different one, and not knowing anybody, not knowing who you can trust or anything like that. So I do remember spending a lot of time crying because I did not understand what was happening. And so I was very nervous and I was very scared. But life in a mission, starting out, was at first it seemed like it was pleasant a little bit. It's kind of like the honeymoon stage, which with most things in life, there's always a little short-term period where things are better off than they were before for you anyway.
What year
in
was
the
this,
sense that
Elijah? What year did you go in there?
I could not say, just because I was so young. I did not. Our time wasn't really a concept I even understood at the time. So I was that young. So
Yeah.
I was not aware. And also in Haiti, time isn't necessarily something we keep up with the way we keep up in America. Everybody has an age, or when you were born, you're aware of when you were born. We don't really do that in Haiti, at least from what I understood. So I never actually knew my age at the time I
Wow.
came into the mission. So it's just one of those. It seems kind of silly, but a luxury that you don't have the time to worry about.
That sounds
So,
kind
Yeah.
of nice, actually.
yes, yes, it
So,
is.
so you we know just based on the records that at least you were there from the 2006 or 7 through 2010 when you were released. So number of years before that you got there, most likely maybe a few years or so before that.
Right, right.
Okay.
Yes, because I believe it was later on then I began to understand that adoptions did happen in the mission, and of course everybody's dream was to get adopted and get picked by people who are coming into the mission. It was just like the thing that's what you live for in the mission is to get adopted. That was like the best thing that could possibly happen to you. So like yes, but anyway, my first introduction there was like I said, it was pleasant at first, and later it became less pleasant. And I think it's like particularly with we had school. We went to school. School was a new concept to me. Like where I lived, my parents there was no school. There was you were a baby, and for a time, you were taken care of when you were able to walk or and stand. You were expected to do your part in order to contribute to the family's survival. So and I was at that stage before I came into the mission. I was walking and I had chores and stuff I had to do. It's just that what I could contribute was very limited compared to what my, I guess, would have been my niece and nephew, because that was my sister. So, but yes, I came in and we went to school, and I just remember school being very unpleasant for me. I think that's where things started kind of like opening up, like this isn't going to be as great as a place as I thought.
So while you were there, they had classes for you on the mission, basically, or?
No, it was education school.
Okay,
But,
so you went to school every day from. Okay,
yes.
gotcha.
Yeah, I went to school every day, just like you would up here, only it's less pleasant because if you don't know something, you actually get hit and get in trouble because of it. So that's just the nature of
Wow.
it. So it's not necessarily a inviting environment where you get to be a kid and be wrong and just learn what it is, learn actually be able to learn. It was very much a place where you will do what you were told, which I guess is pretty typical. But like, there's the discipline aspect of it too. Is that if you didn't know, you got in trouble. Which,
Gotcha.
looking back now, knowing what I know, is seems just unacceptable to me. Just like you can't expect a child to know. Like there's certain things you just don't know as a child, and it's
Of
about a
course.
learning process. So that was kind of like my first glance into what life in the missionary was going to be like. Is that it wasn't going to be entirely pleasant,
Gotcha.
and I didn't care for school much. I didn't excel or anything like that. I hated it, and just I never enjoyed it.
Sure. So talk about the as you were at the mission. Obviously you were very young, and I know you have some memories in some areas and probably some memories you don't have. So Elijah, talk to us about the environment at the mission and at the orphanage, things that you remember, over those years that you were there.
Okay, the environment there was very unpleasant, to say the least. It was very much. I never felt safe being in the mission. I never felt I could trust anybody. I never felt people had my best interest in mind. I never felt that I could approach any of the people who were responsible for the kids there. I never felt I could approach any of the staff. I didn't feel like I could trust any of them. And there was this constant, just this cloud of fear that existed um, in the atmosphere of the mission itself. It just um, of course, there were times when we would, as a mission full of boys, we would all get in fights, physical fights, and then I don't think that's abnormal.
Yeah, sure.
Kids that are around that age, everybody's different personality, and but anyway, when you'd get in trouble, it was always this physical abuse of some sort of fashion. You would get beaten essentially with a belt or even a whip of some sort.
Was this from like Haitian workers, or was this from the leaders from America, or?
It was from both. It was from Vance, from some, even Pastor Andy disciplined us as well. And
And
there were
was he a
times,
Haitian pastor, or?
yes, he was the Haitian individual who was like, I believe, part of the group that was responsible for the missionary mission where I stayed.
Okay.
Um, but anytime we got in trouble, there was this always this very physical abuse. There was never this, like they talked to you and made you understand. There was never this like parenting or of any sort that occurred. It was always physical abuse.
Hmm.
And there were times where you would have to sit on your knees for like hours,
Wow.
and it wasn't like soft a soft ground. It's like harder. You'd have to sit on your knees on the rocks for like hours, and
Wow.
I came home with bruises on my knees as a result of it. And my mother would see it, and he was like, "What happened to your knees?" I had to tell her. It's like, you know, um, it was I got in trouble in Haiti, and well,
Wow.
because I acted out. There were times where I acted out, and I got in trouble, and part of that was sitting on my knees for hours, and to where I would leave bruises on my knee,
Mm.
and to this day I still have some of them. So, but
Now, now, and thank you for sharing that. I know that's not fun to remember. So you're there in this orphanage, and you have these American leaders, and it's Vance Cherry is leading the
yes,
boys section of the orphanage, and then
yes,
over all of that orphanage is Keith Lashbrook, correct? And did you
correct.
have interactions with Keith Lashbrook at all, or?
I had interactions with Keith Lashbrook whenever, and his son Daniel, whenever I believe it's like couple of incidences where I got in a couple of fights with his son Willie. I was young, and Willie was bullying me. He was younger, so he's like almost like this golden child that nobody touches because he's Keith's son, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was very much a bully as a result of that. So, and I had there's a couple of times I actually in a fight with him, and we fought. I mean, I won, and I got in trouble for it. So, like,
Of
I got
course
in
you won,
trouble
right?
for
Yeah.
it.
You're like, I don't have much memory, but I definitely remember that I won.
Yeah, I mean, you get beaten up
Sure.
enough, eventually you'll win a couple.
Sure, sure.
But and I would be the one to get in trouble for it, despite not being the one to initiate the fight.
Mm.
Get beaten with a belt, and it was I always felt like I was between the two of us. I was I was the only one getting disciplined. That's what I saw.
Yeah.
I don't remember Willie getting in trouble for it. Maybe he got talked to, but I was the one who got in trouble. And Daniel was Keith's son, and he I never really liked him just because the way he acted towards me. He was just very demeaning and just not a very kind person. And I do remember him beating me, and when I got in trouble for fights I got in with Willie, he was typically involved in some form of fashion, whether it was telling Keith or he beating me himself, or
And he was
Keith
like a
beating.
teenager. He was like an older teenager, or he was an
He
adult.
could have been. I can't remember. He might have been an adult. I remember I saw him as an adult,
Sure.
but those were kind of like my predominant interaction with Keith. Outside of the couple of times where I believe my parents have sent me money. Understanding it now, my parents had sent me money for my birthday, and he was supposed to give it to me. And I was at a few times when I asked him. That was the only time I received money that was sent to me specifically for my birthday. But Keith, from what I understand, stayed predominantly at the girls' um, complex and came to the boys' complex on, like, I guess, looking back, special occasions and stuff like that. But the interactions that I had with him was never really pleasant for me, because it typically involved me getting into a fight with his son and me getting
And
beaten as a result of
and
it.
and when you say beaten, like we're not just talking about like small discipline, like a parent would maybe spank a small child or something, like a SWAT.
I'm talking with a belt, like squats with belts and stuff like that, and just it
Gotcha.
was not. It's not what you would normally think of whenever you would discipline your kid. It's like
Sure.
you. And then, of course, there's Vance. He was the one that was over the boys, and I guess with him is he'd always use. He had this really discipline with him was this big stick, and he would do it like if you would get in trouble, he'd discipline you in front of everybody, like
Wow.
pants down. He'd discipline you in front of everybody. So it was really a humiliating process
Wow.
to get in trouble with him. And he had this big stick. He'd walk around our room, very intimidating, like, and made sure that you know almost like a warden type of deal. Everybody stays in line type of deal, and
Yeah.
and should you get in trouble, you typically have about, say, a period of staying on your knees for a while, on the rocks, and then you'd get spanked, which would more than half the time be in front of everybody, in the room, and it was very humiliating.
Wow. So so that was your experience with Keith, and then with Vance, it was also intense in that way, as far as the beatings and the way he kind of walked around in that way.
Yes,
Now,
there was
obviously,
nothing loving about being disciplined in Haiti, and there was nothing loving about it. It was very much a shameful feel that came from being disciplined, just because you were, with Vance, you were very much exposed, and in front of everybody, with having your pants down in front of everybody and getting spanked, and with Keith, for me, I think with Keith, it was kind of, for me, it's kind of like the injustice of it, because I didn't initiate the fights, and I never saw Willie get disciplined for initiating the fight. So, like, there was a sense of injustice there for me, that I got in trouble for defending myself, and Willie got away with it. So, and of course, we had Pastor Andy's wife, who she was really abusive too. She'd use a whip on you, like she would strip you down
wow.
and use it like completely and use a whip, and that's what we that's nobody in the orphanage liked her. None of the boys liked her because of that,
Right.
because she was a very intimidating woman, and you know it. It was a little scary, because all these people who are supposed to be caring for you, as kids, there's a sense of fear of your parents, but it's more a respect versus actually being afraid of them. Whereas in Haiti, in the mission, it was very much a fear of, like, this person could hurt me, and I need to do whatever I can to stay out of their way and make sure they are not noticing me. It was not good to be noticed very much
Right.
in the mission, because it typically meant you were in trouble of some sort form or fashion, and so yeah, it was not a good environment. There, like I said, there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of fighting. It was very much, looking back, very much a survival situation, survival to the fittest situation,
Yep.
because there were younger boys my age, and teenagers, and then there were older boys who were like in the 17, 18, even 20 range of age, and they could beat you anytime they wanted to. So you said something they didn't like, you would get beaten by them. at any time they felt the need for it or felt like they wanted just there was just no sense of safety. There
Wow.
was no sense of like someone's looking out for me. It was very much like I said, survival to the fittest, everybody for themselves, and um,
Wow.
it was definitely not a place of love, not the type of place you think of when you think of missionary work. There
Yeah.
was no love. There was no love in the mission.
Wow. Elijah, I'm going to ask you another question here. All right. Okay. So obviously, Elijah, the environment was not a loving environment. And, you have a missions organization that has missionaries that are associated with Globe International that are running this mission organization in Haiti. And your experience was pretty negative along the lines of just the overall environment. Now, get into, as much as you're comfortable with, the when you started to notice the essay going on, and with you as well as the other boys there, with Vance, etc. And if you can just go into some of that as much as you're comfortable with.
Um, I think I started noticing the essay was really when some of the teenage boys were, started experimenting with each other. I noticed that. Um, Obviously, I was a kid. I wasn't really aware of what it was, and um, and then it became almost like something that was. It was almost like for a time I was not aware of it, but it existed. But then as I got you know, more comfortable and, I'm growing up a little bit, my brain's developing and stuff. So like and I'm starting to notice things that I haven't noticed before. And that's when I noticed the essay with the boys experimenting with each other and being aware that Vance was also participating in that and, giving the boys favors and stuff like that if they spent like it was really weird. Like we'd have incidences where the boys would be along with Vance, um and they would come back with some kind of treat or something like that, and they would talk about the essay and stuff that happened. And Vance would at night go around walking in the room with the boys and talking about um, talking and touching the boys. So there was essay going on there. I I was not in in any of those interaction with him walking around essayed in those incidences, but I did have an incident where we went swimming and I was essayed by him and while we were in the water. Um, and that was, I guess, from what that was normal. And whenever we went swimming with him, a lot of the boys would be essayed, and the boys would, touch each other as well. And
Hmm.
so it became almost a normal topic and normal conversation in the living space where Vance was very much involved in the essay that happened with the boys experimenting with each other, talking to Vance about it, you know, talking about touching themselves, and you know, I don't want to get too explicit, but um, boys trying to. I really don't want to get too explicit. Um,
Well, you can share explicitly, and I can edit certain portions of words or things like that. My understanding is you're trying to lead to the reality that boys are basically trying to have sex with each other in some way, shape, or
yes,
form. Yeah.
Yes, there was that, and there was boys, experimenting, finding ways to, make their genitals bigger or get bigger. And Vance giving advice on that, telling them how to get bigger, and talking to them about um, having intercourse with girls and
Gotcha.
and all of that. And Vance was very much involved in the conversation. So
Yeah. Wow.
and yes, he was very much involved in It's not educating at all, but very very gross way
He
telling the
treated it
boys.
like sex education, basically.
Yes, he did. He did, and I learned a lot that I shouldn't have at that age.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
and and on some level, it became almost to the point where you didn't really want to go to bed without having pants and belt on, especially if you had someone sleeping next to you. And I anytime I went to bed, I always made sure I had pants on, and because I didn't trust who I was sleeping next to. It was such a vile environment, and Vance was very much participating in it instead of deterring it. Um,
Wow. Can I ask you a question about this? As you're talking, I'm just thinking about, this is a Christian missions organization. Um, Obviously, we know based on our findings over the last year or so that Keith Lashbrook was at one time a teacher at Fire School of Ministry, literally taught classes, taught people at Fire School of Ministry. And, where Dr. Michael Brown was the head of Fire School of Ministry, Keith Lashbrook was a teacher there. Then we know that he went on to Haiti after he was fired from Fire School of Ministry for essaying students, and that was brought to the attention of Michael Brown. He fired Keith Lashbrook. And Keith Lashbrook was in Haiti prior to his time at Fire speaking at Fire School. We know that now too, and so he went from there, fired from there, then back to Haiti. So I'm saying all this to say it's supposed to be a godly organization, like on fire men and women of God leading out this organization, coming from Globe International. That was obviously that it wasn't connected ministry wise, as like that nobody was under each other, but there was a clear trust between the two organizations. It seems that even Natalie and Melissa, your mother, and Chersti, they all connected through Fire School to Globe in some way, and it was kind of a thumbs up, like, yes, this is a great organization to work with, a great organization to adopt from. And so you've got Keith running this orphanage, and he brings on Vance under him to run the boys part of the orphanage. So I'm just thinking, these young boys, are you getting, I mean, are they also trying to teach the Bible to you while they're also doing this, or was that just not a part of the conversation at all? Can you talk about that mixture that you experienced with that?
oh yes, yes. I thought I knew who God was when I was in the mission. I thought, I had multiple occasion asked God into my heart and stuff when I was in Haiti, and I thought, there was, some anointing there. But I've come when I came home, I came to realize there wasn't any anointing there, that I didn't really know who Jesus was. But yes, we did have, we had church every Sunday. Everybody went to church every Sunday. And we had multiple incidences where Keith spoke, well, some with Pastor Andy translating. Pastor Andy was the main pastor of the church that we went to. And would have missionaries who would come in and would teach to the students, and we had everybody involved, kind of like had Sunday school with the students and everything like that. But even then, it's almost like we're putting up a facade of what the mission is really like. When they do come in, it's like
So if
everybody
a
put their
visitor's
best.
there, you're saying it's like you build up, okay, everybody put on your best behavior, basically.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And but once they're gone, like anything you say will later come back to haunt you. So if you anger anyone in any shape or form, like the people who will remain with you, you will be paying the price later on. Um, One of the incidents that happened is that I think it was actually when one of my parents were visiting. I angered one of the older boys, and I was really young. I angered one of the older boys by saying something, and later that night, I got beaten because of it. I got I got beaten because of it, and that's like one of those. That was one. That was one of the incidences when the realization came out to me. It's just like, the fact having missionaries, having even your supposed adopted parent that will not keep you safe, because they will eventually leave and you will remain. So you have to keep up the act, so to speak,
Wow.
even when they're gone. But anytime we had missionaries come in, it was always an act. It was very much an act, and there was no anointing coming from Keith, Vance, Pastor Randy, or anything like that. And the rare occasions we'd have missionary come in that, there were some cases we had people who came in who were anointed, and when they left, I remember this one incident. We had this group of missionaries came in, and that I don't remember what exactly the message was, but I do remember that it touched every one of the boys that was there, enough so that after they left, there was almost like a sense of, we were very touched by it, but we had a lot of the boys crying and very remorseful for whatever reason, which is weird to say, but in the mission, you don't really cry because crying is a sign of weakness, and you don't really want to show that. So you don't want to cry in front of other boys.
Yeah.
There was just no. It was a sign of weakness. So the act of crying itself, I think, looking back, just showed what was happening in the heart of the boys that that had experienced the message the missionaries had presented to them. But yeah, we had like an entire week where it was just everyone was so much nicer and kinder to each other, and but then that kind of blows away, and we're back to everybody's out for themselves and surviving. There's this cloud of uncertainty, cloud of fear, and untrust, and looming over your head, just knowing that you're never really safe.
Wow. So this gives so much insight, Elijah, the way that you're kind of explaining this, and it's just so heartbreaking to hear this. But I understand that, like when you say if missionaries came in, or even our adopted parents came in. So I want to provide context for all the listeners if you haven't heard this, but the context is that the adoptive parents, like Melissa, for example, your mother who adopted you, when she adopted you, she couldn't just get you right away. There was a couple years process, and so adopted parents would come and visit. Is that correct? And then they would leave?
Yes, they would come and visit, and then they would leave. And the moment that they were there was a honeymoon stage. And everybody was nice to you, and then the moment they're gone, all that stops. And if you slip up while they're there, whatever you said is going to be used against you later. So,
Wow.
like,
Wow.
as
So
far
you're
as
like,
me,
you're like, hey, Mom. And you're probably thinking in your mind, I want to tell her everything. I want you to rescue me. But then eventually you decide, well, it'd be better just to be quiet. And
yes. Well, not even that, because I don't trust her either. Like, I don't trust anybody.
Makes
There is no
sense.
trust for anybody. The only person I trust is Elijah. That's it.
Wow.
There is no trust of anybody, and it remained that way even after a year. When I came home, I didn't trust my parents. I didn't allow myself to trust my parents, because trusting people typically got me beaten, or like it never ended well for me when I trusted people. So I didn't trust my parents even after I came home. I always felt like there was this constant fear after I came home that I would be sent back. So
Wow.
I never said anything, and I
Yeah.
didn't fully trust them because I thought they would get rid of me. They could and would get rid of me at any moment they
That makes so
felt like.
much sense. Yeah, that makes so much sense. Okay, so and I'm even thinking of, just in context to everything, parents going there and back. I remember Natalie telling a story, who's really good friends with your mother, and Natalie had adopted some children from Haiti at the same time. Natalie told us a story that she sat across from Michael Brown in 2008, after Keith Lashbrook had been fired by Fire School of Ministry in 2007, I believe. And she said she sat across from him, telling him the story of how she's adopting from Lashbrook's orphanage and telling him how she's doing. And because it was at the 10-year Fire School reunion, and he just listened to her and thought didn't say much about it, I guess positive or negative. And that always baffles her to this day because Lashbrook was fired from the School of Ministry in 2007 by, ultimately Dr. Brown, because he was the head of the school, for SA. And so to find out that adopted parents flying over there, coming back, flying over there, and then shares with the same man that fired the man that's running an orphanage that she's going to be adopting from that orphanage, it's just a little bit, it's questionable. That's all I can say. I can't, I don't know.
It's very questionable. Your mind kind of starts spinning, and the allegations coming out against Dr. Brown is just like, well, maybe he didn't blow the whistle on Keith because the allegations that are now coming out on him, it's like that is the reason he didn't blow the whistle on Keith, because if he is a man of God like he's saying he is, and his heart is with the, with the kids and all of that stuff, all of that icing on the cake that like the spilling and telling, I felt like his first reaction would be like, we got to get this man out of here because I know his history, and we need to protect these kids. So
Sure.
when I hear that, it just kind of like reinforced the fact, like, the allegations coming out against him are very much true.
Sure.
Because had he blown the whistle on Keith, there's a chance that he would be putting his own head on the block.
Sure. Yeah. And it's just, it's just looking at it logically, trying to look at the timeline, and, we've gotten some heat for talking about that, but the more I look at the receipts, the more it's just tough to see any other thing besides just to claim ignorance seems like total negligence, and to claim knowledge would be actually evil. So it's one or the other. Terrible negligence that is terrible leadership, or likely just purposeful negligence, which is evil. So I don't know. We don't know, but we're just looking at it as any normal person should and would, based on all the stories we've heard and the things we're seeing. So talk to us a little bit, if you would, about now. You came out with your story, and you've told us today more of this story and your experience. Now you're home. I know you've walked through lots of counseling, and you've clearly grown into just an awesome man of God. And at this stage of the game, all of a sudden you're hearing all this stuff, because of Fire School Ministry. And then you saw Natalie and your mother come out with the stories, and you saw the Shersty and Eric interview, them just telling their stories. Talk to us about your journey over the last 6 months, and what's that been like for you, and just anything you want to share about all this stuff that's coming out.
It's been very eye opening, just because like I thought I knew all of it, but I didn't, because one, there's a whole culture around the mission that I did not understand. Apparently, from what I understood, the parents would bring their kids to the mission because they could not feed them, with the understanding that they could later come back and get them. And my parents, in particular, brought me to the mission. But in my case, I do remember my biological dad being involved in my adoption. So it was almost like I got sold,
Hmm.
which is very, very kind of hard to. It's a hard thing to swallow. Well, I'm very grateful for everything that I have now. And I do believe that it was God's plan all the entire time. But it's still hard to think that your biological parents, essentially sold you. And I honest, my counsel has really kind of helped me to wrap my head around some of this stuff because you kind of have to look at the culture in Haiti differently than you do here because it
Mm-hmm.
is different. In
Yeah.
Haiti, it's all about survival. Your ability to contribute to the family is everything. So a lot of the things that we have the luxury of, dealing with here, we that doesn't exist in Haiti. I.e., um, I wouldn't love really. Love in Haiti is expressed differently than it is in America. In America, you love someone, you tell it to them. And you tell it to them, and you might buy them a gift, and the way you treat them, and everything like that. In Haiti, you show your love to your family by your ability to, contribute and take care of them. It's an action, more so of an action than um, a something you tell someone.
Hmm.
It's hard to get in the word. It's just different because
It makes
it,
so much
it's
sense. You're
it's
you're doing
almost
a great
it's
job
almost like
explaining.
it's nothing personal. Like this is the best option. Like and it's sad and you think of it, it's a little funny, but it's nothing personal. Like this is the best option, and the best option for our family is for you to go so we can have this money to survive.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
and it's sad. And it's sad. It sucks that they're put in that position where they have to make a choice like that. But that is the reality of what happened with me. Is that and I was told for the longest time to tell that my parents were dead. But there were multiple occasions of my parent visiting my sister at the girls at the place that the girls stayed. There were some instances where they came to visit me as well. I was so fearful when I first came home that my adopted parents would find out that my biological parents were alive, and I would be sent back to Haiti. That was like in my
Hmm.
mind the worst thing that could possibly ever happen, and it kind of contributes to the fact that's why I didn't trust him too. That's one of the
Wow.
factors that contributed to that is that I can't really trust him. I can't tell them anything because there's a chance I might be sent back. Um, because like while in my mind where I'm at right now is a billion times better than where I was. So like I got to do whatever I can to make sure I survive. It's being in constant survivor mode, and
Right.
you've been in it for so long you don't even realize that that is the life that you're living. But I didn't understand at the time that I did not need to be in a survivor mode until later on when I started out of the blue speaking to my parents. I got comfortable enough that things started just spewing out of me, and that's when all of this came into started. The light started shining on
And
everything.
that's when you started telling telling the story of what happened to you in
Yes.
Haiti, and without getting into detail, because obviously it's not your story to tell, but your sister also told her portion of the story, which happened with Keith Lashbrook because he was involved with the girls, and then his brother-in-law, who he brought on, Vance Cherry, was involved with the boys in the abusive situation. So you start telling that story, and
Yes, I
yeah,
started.
go ahead.
I started telling that story as as a matter of fact type of deal. Well, like to me, it's my normalcy. Like it's normal to me. I'm just telling this story, and I'm 8 years old, right? And I'm just telling my parents this story, and that they're sitting there laughing because some of the things I'd say were funny. But then I started getting to some of the essay stuff and some of the abusive stuff, and in my mom's face, kind of
Mm,
went from a laughter to, she started contemplating what I was saying, whether there was any truth to it, and
wow.
it wasn't too long before she spoke with my aunt, and she started talking to her kids, and her kids were essentially corroborating what I was saying because it was the truth. I wasn't lying or anything like that. Just my way of telling it. It was my normalcy. It was normal for me.
Mm.
Those essay events, those physical abuse. That was my normalcy. That was normal for me. And it wasn't long before everybody started telling their story. But it took, like I said, it took me a while to get comfortable enough with my mother to even come out with any of this stuff. Like, it was never my intention to, start any of this. Like, I was an 8-year-old telling a story, and those things, that I had been hanging on to for so long, deep down, just I think it was an act of God because they kind of just started spewing out of me when I was on that beach, and my mother, would would the guide of God started catching on to him. It's like, hey, there's something's not right here.
Yeah.
So that's how everything started, the story and everything started just spilling out, and everybody else started telling their stories. So,
Wow. I want to read this message from Dr. Michael Brown to Natalie. And this is from, and I'll add it in the edit on the screen later, but this was on February 21st, 2011. And Michael Brown says to Natalie, he says, I'm continuing to speak to Globe on your behalf, and I continue to ask them serious questions. I do need to say, however, that posts like your most recent one on Facebook mentioning Keith, meaning Keith Lashbrook, by name in this context, and I think it's the context of abuse, and airing things out for the world to see, make it much more difficult for justice to really be done. Can we talk about this? Dr. Brown. So apparently Natalie had posted something warning others about Keith Lashbrook in 2011, and Michael Brown saw that post and decided to direct message her about using Keith's name publicly because it would stop what he said would be stopping justice. What are your thoughts about that type of a message, knowing what Keith Lashbrook had done and how that also affects what Vance Cherry had done?
I think that was just Dr. Brown being manipulative, again, using, the term justice to manipulate in order to get the outcome that he wanted, which was to keep everybody quiet from going public with the information, because he knew the truth. He knew the truth from the beginning, that Keith, the type of person Keith was, and that was his way of being manipulative to essentially contain the situation and find ways to cover it up, or even give them a chance to cover it up. Because the reality is, I think that his uh, his authority with over my aunt and my mom, looking back, is a terrible thing. But I think they were in the church for so long, they had been um, brainwashed on some level spiritually, by him, and as a result, he was able to have that influence and manipulate him like that. But I don't think it has anything to do with justice, because if it was about justice, they would have been on our side from the get go. I mean, even just the thought of allegation of abuse on that level, if your intention is to serve um, to serve and act in a way that is Christ-like, right? It would have been to investigate, first of all, um, to apologize to the families and reassure them that everything would be done. Everything they would do everything they could in order to make this right, and actually investigate these guys. But even less so, even more so, given the fact that Keith had a history of essaying younger people.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah.
I think that was just him using his position as a spiritual leader to manipulate the situation in order to contain my aunt.
And that would be Natalie, right? Your aunt.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's your opinion based on what we see now, public information out there, and this is our opinion based on what's publicly provided, and it's hard to not see that as anything different. We know that Tom Barry had gone to the FBI about Keith Lashbrook a year prior, or in 2010, and so for Natalie to make public his name, in essence, is to warn people this man is dangerous, and it seems that that shouldn't be a problem. So I don't understand why it's a problem or how not making that name public stopped quote unquote justice. But apparently that was Dr. Brown's way of helping provide justice. So it is strange. And I think honestly, as we look at this all, we're all kind of like, blinking, over and over as we stare at these emails and this process going.
It has nothing to do with justice, because justice wasn't served. It has everything to the contrary. It has everything to do with covering stuff up and cleaning house. That's what it has everything to do. It has nothing to do with justice. Because if it had anything to do with justice, and they were these godly men they're claiming to be, these Vance and Keith Lashbrook would be in prison right now. They would be in prison.
Now, I want to add to that thought there, because in speaking with your mother, speaking with Natalie, speaking with 𝐂𝐓, one thing that we've run into is that the ICE investigator said one of the biggest problems was that Natalie, Melissa, your mother, and 𝐂𝐓 went to 𝐂𝐓 about this instead of going immediately to the authorities about this and going because 𝐂𝐓 did 𝐂𝐓's work. This is from the ICE investigator, apparently, is that 𝐂𝐓's work with the knowledge that they had based on Melissa, 𝐂𝐓, and Natalie coming forward to them. It gave them the opportunity to put together the task force, find out all the information, and in essence, kind of what the ICE investigator said was it slowed justice, actually. It made it tougher for them to get justice. This is from our understanding from the ICE investigator. So allegedly this is what was said. And the problem with the receipt of what Brown is saying, hey, I'm talking to 𝐂𝐓 on your behalf. I'm doing this on your behalf. We're working this. Everyone, there's an email out there to the grads from 2010 where he said, trust the process, do not speak publicly about it, and we're going to encourage you not to, quote, go legal, is what he said about this. So all of that said, it seems that this slowed the process of justice versus what he said would bring the process of justice. Nevertheless, here we are. I think for you at this stage, I guess, is there anything else you want to say that? I mean, you've said quite a bit about that and about the cover-up culture. Is there anything else you want to say just overall watching what's happening with the Fire International, with 𝐂𝐓, with Michael Brown, with the grads, the whole community, with hearing from your own family speaking out? Is there anything else you'd like to say regarding this topic?
Yes. I think I was reading, my mom was telling me that Josh Peters was coming out and saying that they closed our case without finding any signs or any evidence of abuse. And, that just really kind of like boggles my mind, because when I think of evidence of abuse, there's so much evidence of abuse. I think my sister's one of them. Like, I lost my sister because of the trauma that she had experienced in the orphanage. I didn't get to grow up with her, and it wasn't her fault. Like, she needed help beyond what we could provide for her. So that in itself is evidence when you have, not just my sister, but other kids that came home who were essaying their adoptive siblings and stuff like it, and stuff, and to the point where they had to be removed from the homes that they were coming into. You have kids you have kids who have continually to abuse, like physically abuse other kids at the homes they came into. Um, and and you have incidences of kids who, I don't know if, I'm not a psychologist, but like you have incidences of kids on some level going back to their abuser and
Right.
stuff. But we know for a fact they were abused because of the way they behaved when they came home. So there's so much evidence. Like I needed therapy. I had some serious issues that I needed to deal with, and my mother can attest to that, because she had to find a way to discipline me that wasn't physical, or that would, she had to find ways around disciplining me when I came home.
Right. Right.
At first she didn't know that I had been so traumatized, so anytime it was like I would get, it was a spanking, what it would do, it was just like I would get triggered,
Of course.
or
Yeah.
my sister would get triggered, but she wouldn't know. She didn't know that because she wasn't, she's not a psychologist, or didn't understand that, the act of disciplining us was triggering for us. So like her way of disciplining me had to change. Whereas if I it it got to the point, instead of getting a spanking, I was placed in my room. I had to be placed in my room, and that was the best way to deal with it. Um, I I had extreme trust issues because of it. I didn't trust anybody, like I said, for the longest time, and even to this day, I still have a hard time, letting myself be trusting towards people, and without when I meet people, until you've proven you can be trusted, I don't necessarily trust you 100%.
Sure.
And I guess that's pretty normal for most people, but in my case, it's kind of more skewed than your average typical person because of my experience and stuff. It's gotten better because of my therapy, but when I hear someone like Josh Peters saying that there was no physical evidence, I just think, wow, that's ridiculous, because there is so much evidence. Us kids are the evidence. The way our lives have been changed with just the way we now live, or with the abuse we've experienced. I got, like I said, I lost my sister, and and I have a sister, but I don't feel like I know her. Um, and she's the only biological person that I have in my life, individual that I have in my life. But I don't feel like I know her because I never grew up with her, and and that angers me. And then you have someone like Josh Peterson saying there was no evidence. I mean, her entire life and everything she's experienced is evidence of the abuse that took place. Um, the fact that families, had to separate their biological kids from their adopted kids are evidence that of the trauma that they experience. So when I hear that someone like Josh Peterson, who I don't know what his part in the investigation was, um, it kind of pisses me off, because I don't know how you can look at it this this situation and say there is no evidence, when so many people are basically telling the exact same story. People who are not in any shape or form connected to each other, kids even who are not connected to each other. Um, you know, it's not like we're getting together and plotting and everybody's telling the same story.
Right.
It's hard to keep a lie straight, but it's easy to keep the truth straight, and everybody's telling the exact same story. So it's like, so it's really disheartening to hear someone like Josh Peterson saying that there was no evidence found, and it's very disheartening because he's supposedly a godly man. So
Well, all these guys are supposedly godly men, and it's like over the last year and a half or more in this space, it's been watching godly man after godly man either knowingly twist the truth to their own benefit, or, you know, or just literally, you know, straight up lie, knowing they're lying, or other men that are trying to stand up for the supposed godly men, and because they don't have all their facts straight or all the information, they just kind of let these guys get by. And, you know, we've got to have truth speakers and truth tellers. And one of the things that I just honor and respect you for is, obviously nobody can choose their path in the sense of what they're born into and what they go through in life. You went through what you went through, but your perspective on this side of it is very powerful, because it's not like, oh yeah, everything's fine. You're like, no, I'm doing the work. I'm going to therapy. I mean, I'm doing the work, and the Lord's involved, and I'm actually meeting with a therapist and all the things. But you're like at this place where you're able to speak out, and it's still painful to speak, I'm sure, but it's empowering. Oh, yeah. It's empowering because there's others that have been through these things that are going to look at you as a sign of hope. And then there's also, it's a shot across the bow to ministry leaders, ministers all over the U.S. and the world that think, oh, we'll do this and we'll get away with it because we've got influence, we've got power, we've got money, and we've got a backing by many other ministers who will prop us up, put us on their podcast, give us their platforms, and we'll just all back each other up, circle the wagons, and nobody will be able to speak out. Nobody will have the power to speak out. They don't have platforms. Like, you guys didn't have a platform to speak out, but guess what?
Oh, no.
This is your platform to speak out right now, and you're doing it. And I'm just so proud of you for doing it.
We definitely did not have a platform to speak at. I, you know, it's one of the scenarios right now. I feel like, you know, looking back, I wish I knew back then what I know now. Like, because I feel like our story would have, there would have definitely been some prosecution done if I was not, you know, one, if I knew how to properly communicate everything that happened to me thoroughly in a way that everybody could understand. Because you gotta understand, when all this came out, I didn't speak a ton of English. So like, I was telling my story to the best of my ability, but I did not fully understand what was happening. So my mom would try to explain to me, but I did not fully understand what was happening. So it's like me, all this is spewing out of me. And my mom is having to tell me, like, hey, none of these things were okay. It's not okay that you were essay. It's not okay that you were beaten. It's not okay that, you know, they did this to you. It's not. And I wish, going back, I wish I knew how to speak English better, and I wish I understood just like how to communicate better, because I think that would have played a big role. Because I spoke to the ICE investigator, and one of the things he said was that the information was coming from our moms instead of us because we were so young, and that made things a bit difficult. And, you know, now I'm an adult. You know, I've essentially told them, like, hey, I'm willing to speak now. I don't need my mom to speak for me anymore. I can speak for myself now. I understand. And I know what happened to me.
Right.
And, you know, I'm ready to talk.
Yeah.
And it's really frustrating when you hear that, you know, prosecutors did not continue with the case because they felt like they didn't have enough evidence. And again, I just like shake my head. What do you mean you didn't have enough evidence? There's so much evidence. There's like, all of the kids are evidence. We are the evidence. Like the way, like, our behavior is the evidence. The lives that we've changed since we've came to America as a result of our trauma is the evidence, you know?
Right.
There's so much evidence, and it's like, it just makes you, it's, you know it's wrong, but you can't do anything about it. That's what's most frustrating, is knowing something's wrong, but you're powerless to do anything against it.
Well, you're not powerless, and I only say that because you have a voice, and you're using that voice, and there's something empowering about what you're doing right now. I don't know if you feel it, but I do. and I know that the listeners and the viewers do, and it doesn't always change things day one, but I have a suspicion that this story is far from over for everybody involved. And, nobody's out to just destroy anybody in this, but we're out for the truth. We want the truth. And I say that to every person watching, every organization watching, Fire International, Globe International, Dr. Michael Brown himself, Keith Lashbrook, if he's come across this, which I'm sure he has, Vance Cherry, if he has, Doug Gaiman. We don't want to destroy anything, but we want to stand for those whose lives had been destroyed, but God has redeemed. And we want to give a voice to those who had no voice, but now they have a voice to tell their story. And we're okay putting the timeline together and looking at it. And I don't know why Dr. Brown is not okay with looking at that timeline in the same way and going, why was Keith Lashbrook fired for essaying a girl on campus at Fire School of Ministry who had apparently lived on his campus? Why was he okay firing that person and then talking to an adoptive mother a year later, realizing that that adoptive mother was adopting from that man's orphanage who had been fired from his own campus? Why is he okay with that timeline looking so suspicious and him saying, I knew nothing of Keith Lashbrook. I knew nothing of him leading an orphanage. I knew nothing of him being a possible abuser. You don't know that he's dangerous to work around children after the situation he had on your own campus. That is either willful negligence, which is evil, or it's absolute terrible leadership skill overall. You cannot turn that page either way. So, you guys know, but there are cease and desist letters, all those things coming out saying silence, don't talk about this, don't connect Dr. Brown to this. We're not connecting Dr. Brown to this. We're just looking and sharing our opinion based on the evidence that's public. And so I'm saying this to just say you are sharing your story, the way it affected you, and we just want everybody to be empowered to look at this and say, let's just have the truth. It's been this many years. Yeah. Let's just have the truth, right? I'm going to give you the last word, and we're going to shut this interview down. But Elijah, go for it. Last word that you want to share. All you, sir.
I agree with what you said. We're not the one connecting Dr. Brown to this. The facts are connecting Dr. Brown to it. The timeline and everything. And, it's really sad. It makes me angry to think that, the people who are supposed to hold him accountable isn't, asking him to, hey, the Christian thing to do would be to look at these timelines and do what the right thing is. And it's really sad because I was reading like a lot of the results for the Brown investigation. They said that they did not agree with the results, and essentially they're freeing him up to go back into doing what he was doing before, and they're not holding him accountable. So I completely agree with you that we're not out to destroying anybody. We're out to presenting the fact to people, and that is what I'm after. Is here are the facts. What I'm after is justice.
That's
what
right.
What I'm after is for them to be held accountable for what happened, and so that nobody else will ever be hurt again. Because when you hear people like Keith is still out in mission, it's like,
my goodness.
Somebody's getting abused in some form or fashion, and it's like, well, and if they're not, it's only a matter of time till he gets comfortable. So, like, I want to do everything that I can to make sure that nobody else is abused. That's my goal in doing this.
That's powerful, Elijah. Well, thank you so much for speaking up. Thank you for coming on our show. Thank you for speaking on Laura Lynn's show 4 or 5 months ago. And obviously you've processed more and more and more, and you're giving more and more and more of your details and your story and your heart and your message at this point. And I just believe that God has a powerful plan for you that you're accomplishing even through this heartbreak and heartache. And I think we've only begun to see that process. So thank you so much for being on the show, brother. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up.